Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unfiltered and Unapologetic, the space where we talk about healing, money, boundaries, direction, and what it actually looks like to build a life that feels safe without glorifying burnout or leaving our humanity behind. I'm your host, Caitlin Gil-Soto, born and raised in Lawrence, Massachusetts, also raised between Bani and El Cibao, and proudly Dominicana. And today we're talking about the shift from survival to direction, what it really looks like to build a life that doesn't require burnout just to function. Not in theory, not motivationally, in real life. Because a lot of people reach a point where things finally start to stabilize emotionally, financially, internally, and instead of feeling clarity, they feel disoriented. The pressure that used to drive everything isn't there anymore, but direction hasn't fully taken shape yet. This episode is about that space. What changes when survival stops leading? How money, goals, and consistency start working differently? And how to move forward without replacing survival with a new version of burnout. I have your first journal prompt here for you guys. What already feels less reactive in my life than it used to? And the affirmation for this question is, I am allowed to live without urgency, driving every decision. When survival is active, money carries everything. Not just bills, identity, fear, worth, and safety. Money becomes the place where all the pressure lands. If money feels tight, everything feels tight. If money feels uncertain, the body goes into alert. That's why money decisions don't just feel practical, they feel personal. It's why budgeting can trigger anxiety instead of clarity. Why checking your bank account can spike your heart rate. Why one unexpected expense can throw off your entire nervous system. In survival mode, money becomes the emotional center of life. Not because you're irresponsible, but because your body learned that money equals safety. But when regulation increases, even slightly, something important changes. Money still matters. It still requires your attention. It still impacts your options, but it stops running your nervous system. You don't react as quickly. You don't spiral as deeply. You don't rush decisions just to get relief. Instead of trying to fix anxiety with financial urgency, you pause. You can look at numbers without immediately attaching meaning to them. You can think in ranges instead of extremes. You can make decisions that are steady instead of reactive. This is how you know healing is translating into real life. Not because money is perfect, not because fear is gone, but because money no longer has to hold your body together. I have another journal prompt here for you guys. How has my relationship with money already softened or slowed? And the affirmation for this question is, money no longer has to carry my nervous system. In survival mode, goals feel threatening. You choose something and almost immediately feel resistance. Doubt shows up, second guessing kicks in, the urge to reconsider, revise, or abandon appears, not because the goal is wrong, but because choosing removes the fog. Direction exposes patterns. It exposes fear of failure, fear of success, fear of being seen, fear of committing to something that might not work. So instead of feeling motivating, goals turn into pressure, and pressure turns into avoidance. This is why so many people think they're bad at following through, when in reality their nervous system is reacting to exposure, not lack of discipline. But when survival eases, goals change function. They stop feeling like tests you have to pass. They stop feeling like deadlines chasing you. They become orientation points. something you reference, not something that controls you. You don't need to constantly reaffirm them. You don't need to force motivation. You don't need to prove commitment through exhaustion. Instead, you check in. You adjust without abandoning. You refine without panicking. You move forward without self-betrayal. Direction becomes something you return to, not something you perform. That's the shift from survival-based striving to adult regulated direction. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. How do I relate my goals differently now than I used to? And the affirmation for this question is, direction guides me without demanding urgency. When consistency is driven by pressure, it's loud. Big pushes, big decorations, big restarts. It looks impressive at first, and then it collapses. That kind of consistency depends on adrenaline, on guilt, on fear of falling behind. So when the pressure drops, the habit drops with it. But consistency that comes from capacity feels completely different. It's quieter, less visible, less dramatic. You don't announce it. You don't rebrand it every week. You don't need a reset to get back on track. You just keep showing up. Not perfectly, not intensely, but reliably. This kind of consistency doesn't need motivation to survive. It's built into your actual life. You stop negotiating with yourself every day. You stop needing recovery after basic follow-through. You stop swinging between extremes of on and off. This is what self-trust looks like in practice. Not discipline marathons. Not forcing yourself through exhaustion, but doing what you said you would do because your nervous system can hold it. Consistency stops being something you try to have and starts being something that reflects how safe your life actually is. I have a journal prompt here for you guys. Where am I showing up more steadily, even if it looks less intense? And the affirmation for this question is, consistency grows from trust, not force. One of the clearest signs that survival is no longer leading your life is how your decisions start to feel. In survival, every decision feels loaded, emotionally charged, high stakes. You overthink, you loop, you replay conversations in your head. Not because you're indecisive, but because your nervous system is scanning for danger. When regulation increases, decision-making simplifies. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because fewer choices feel threatening. You stop asking, what if this goes wrong? What if I regret this? What if I mess up? And you start asking, does this fit? Does this make sense for me? Does this align with the life that I'm building? You don't need as much reassurance. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't revisit the same decision over and over. That's not avoidance. That's clarity. You're no longer choosing from fear. You're choosing from alignment. And alignment doesn't yell. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand urgency. It stabilizes. I have another journal prompt here for you guys. What decision feels cleaner and less emotionally loaded now? And the affirmation for this question is, I trust myself to make decisions without panic. A life that doesn't rely on burnout is structured differently. Not emotionally, structurally. In survival, life requires constant recovery. You push hard, then crash. You hold it together, then fall apart. You get through the week, then need the weekend just to feel human again. That cycle becomes normal. But when survival is no longer running the system, something shifts. Your life starts to require less recovery. Not because you're doing less, but because you're doing what actually fits your capacity. Your schedule has margins. Your days aren't stacked back to back. Your nervous system isn't constantly playing catch up. You don't need to recover from your own life. You don't need to reset every few weeks. You don't need dramatic breaks to survive basic routines. You don't need to escape to feel okay. This is one of the clearest signs that burnout is no longer the strategy. Life feels steadier. Energy is more even. Rest feels restorative instead of desperate. Sustainability stops being a concept and becomes something you feel in your body. Your life starts to work without exhausting you. I have the last journal prompt here for you guys. What feels more sustainable in my life right now? And the affirmation for this question is, my life is allowed to work without exhausting me. This episode isn't asking you to fix anything. It isn't asking you to decide your whole future. And it isn't asking you to push yourself into clarity. It's asking you to notice what's already different. When survival stops leading, life doesn't suddenly feel exciting. It feels stable. Less reactive, less dramatic, less urgent. Direction doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with adrenaline. It shows up as steadiness. Cleaner decisions, more sustainable rhythms, a life that doesn't require recovery just to continue. That's not stagnation, that's alignment. The final affirmation is, I am building a life that does not require burnout to function. And now let's do a short prayer. Take a deep breath and put your hand on your chest. Dear God, help me choose clarity over urgency and sustainability over pressure. Help me to trust steady progress, even when it doesn't feel dramatic. Let the life I'm building be honest, supportive of my capacity, and aligned with who I'm becoming. Amen. If this episode helped something settle for you, save it or share it with someone who's been learning how to live without constant urgency. You can follow the conversation outside the podcast on TikTok and Instagram at Unfill and Unapologetic Pod, where I share clips, reflections, and conversations that build on these episodes. If you want to support the show, you can do that through the Buzzsprout support link in the show notes. Every contribution helps keep this space going. And if you're someone who processes through writing, I have my blank journals for sale as well on Amazon. They're linked in the show notes. You can listen to Unfiltered and Unapologetic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing yourself. I'll talk to you in the next episode.